How about if instead we looked back over the year and truly reflected and said, hey, you know what? More of that.
Hi, I'm Coach MK, founder of the Fitness Protection Program. I'm a run coach, not a life coach. We're never really talking about the running. Running is the tool. It's the conduit we use to examine the world we live in, as well as its impact on our own lives and the lives of the people around us. How we react to certain people and to certain stories tells us a lot about how we view ourselves. I'm committed to the thoughtful, intentional exploration of the importance of running so that no one discounts their own badassery, ever. Final note, this podcast is geared towards every runner who won't lose their home, livelihood, or health insurance if they show up to the corral with a hangover. Not that I'm encouraging you to do that, just saying. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the Fitness Protection Podcast.
I went shopping with Shiloh. There's this little store, a little boutique called Wish that has a bunch of kid crap and really, really great tchotchke type gift things. And I ended up buying a couple things for myself, one of which is this African sandalwood candle called the St. Anthony of Padua. And I'm not Catholic, so I don't know things like Advent or, which I think is a Catholic thing. I don't know. I know a lot of traditions follow it. I'm ex-evangelical. We absolutely did not. And we also didn't do saints. So I don't know anything about St. Anthony other than he's the saint of finding love and lost articles. I love the smell of this candle, one, but two, I really like the writing on it. St. Anthony, saint of finding love and lost articles, your love for God and empathy for others made you worthy on earth to possess miraculous powers. Help us find the things we love but have lost, including that which is most precious, love itself. I humbly ask of you to help me find love again, or name whatever article you've lost, by whispering this hopeful petition to God. Amen. I was like, oh, that's pretty neat. Well, I mean, that feels apropos for what we're trying to do in the Romjul podcast. We're trying to find a little bit of self-love and trying to cultivate it free of fear and shame. Yay.
Yeah.
St. Anthony, help us all with that.
I had a nanny when I was younger who always used to, whenever something was lost, and I was a mess, I always lost stuff when I was a kid. She would always say, St. Anthony, please come around. Something is lost and cannot be found. And she swore up and down that every time she said that, she would find the thing within 24 hours.
That's cool.
Yeah. She believed very, very much in it. And I have also been to Padua and been to where St. Anthony is buried. And that is absolutely what people go there for. He is the patron saint of lost things. It is in northern Italy, close to Venice. So where I studied abroad, it was like a €5 train ride from where I was living. And that was how I determined whether a place is worth going to visit. Can I get there and back for under €10? If so, let's do it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's beautiful. It's a really beautiful little city. And the Arena Chapel, which is a very famous, totally frescoed chapel by Giotto, is also in Padua. That's I'm pretty sure the major reason people go to visit it. That's why it makes it into guidebooks. It's a serious art history nerd place because this one chapel is super, super famous.
Wow.
So good call on the candle. I think it's exactly right.
Thank you. Well, that's what I was trying to go for today. The things that we do to make us feel better usually make us feel worse. And it hurts me to see that. If there's any part of me that looks like I have my life together or am saner than people around me, I have no idea how that happens, but evidently it does sometimes. It's the fact that my expectations, for the most part, are met. And I feel like the correction doesn't need to come from doing, but from expecting. We set ourselves up for failure before we even begin in ways that are really and truly unfair. Recently, we've been having this conversation, a much broader conversation, ever since Mary Kane added her voice to the chorus of, hey, WTF around Alberto Salazar. We've started to say, look at some of the systems and see the abuse within. Now, I've been yelling about this for years, this is self-abuse, this is a cycle of abuse, but abuse is such a dark word. I get why people are reticent to go there. It can feel like an exaggeration or an overreaction. In reality, it's kind of accurate. There are times when we excuse it and times when we don't. I think most people would agree there's no good reason for a full-grown human to have a bad day and then punch their child in the face. And that's what we think of when we think of child abuse. We don't notice it when it's happening on a much smaller, less obvious, nasty level. And a lot of the things that we do were designed to sort of keep us humble and keep us pious and keep us thirsty and keep us reaching with the promise of greatness at the end of that reach. But I also have to wonder how much of that was just feeding into a patriarchal system where I was complicit in my own oppression. I know that sounds a little far out there and it's probably not what people came to this podcast to hear, but on a higher level, what I'm trying to do when I say I'm trying to like break apart some of these systems of oppression, I'm just challenging everything I see around me that I think could be abusive on any level or have a little bit of abuse inside. Now, maybe you're not ready to say I've been abusing myself for years. And that's cool. You don't have to benefit from what we're going to do today. But hopefully we can introduce a new framework for evaluating yourself, your year, the things that you've been doing. Give yourself an A for the efforts that you've been putting in. Because you know what? We should give A's for effort. They matter. You matter. Your efforts matter. It's not just about the outcome. And when the day comes that we can stop pissing on that notion of A for effort and really say, hey, you know what? Look at what I did. We can still reach for greatness. We can still want more than what we have. We can still seek for improvement, but we'll be motivated to do it instead of fearful that we're doing it wrong and like a little reticent to do it, which is where I think people really go wrong with New Year's resolutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet they're so pervasive. As Sarah Seberg sent me this meme because she knew we were going to record this podcast. It's so commonplace. It goes completely unremarked upon, just like, oh, haha, me too. And it says, my goal in 2020 is to accomplish the goals I set in 2019, which I should have done in 2018 because I made a promise in 2017, which I planned in 2015. And what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to say, oh yeah, me too. And like, share, move on. It's so unexamined, the idea that like, that sounds like a little messed up, honestly, and not really fair to you. And it starts from the assumption that you failed in 2015 and you've failed every year since then.
Yeah. And most of us will feel like a failure 2 weeks into the new year.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is that?
It's really sad.
I think it's kind of obvious why it happens. But when people are like, what are your New Year's resolutions? Conversationally, it's weird to not have any. You're supposed to go with the flow. This is the other thing they teach you to do in charm school, right? Whatever the conversation is, have something to say because a no is a disruptor. It's also like the first rule of improv, just go with it. Like if you remember that in The Office where Michael Scott does improv, he's trying to control the situation. He's not just going with it. And it's so awkward to see. But all of us do that on a very implicit level in polite conversation where we give the right answer instead of the true answer just to keep the conversation going rather than stick on you for saying the wrong thing. So I always have like a thing or two that I throw out there because I just don't want to talk about why I think it's a bad idea or why I think they're a bad idea. Or depending on the company you're into, because you get around competitive people, it becomes like a resolution throwdown. I don't know. This is why I don't do New Year's parties and I haven't in a decade. And I know I need to give people a chance and get back out again, but I'm not there yet. I got little kids, little liabilities. I got 4 of them. I got great reasons to never leave the house again for the next 16 New Year's. So I don't know, but I feel like we should have done this sooner. I wish we had done this earlier in the year. I have no regrets about what we've done. We've just been building as we go, like snowball rolling downhill, being like, are we going in the right direction? Sarah, I hope you're looking because I'm not. I'm really glad that you reminded us to have this podcast about Romjul. Today, on the Day of Miracles, which is the day that we're recording it. Look, if you haven't rolled your eyes yet at the mention of church, I'm about to talk about astrology. I like astrology because astrology relies on natural wonders and very tangible touch points to make you appreciate the world around you. And it always speaks from a perspective of optimism and hope. It's not about the most accurately accurate, perfect predictions. But you know what? Science doesn't do that either. So it depends on what you're asking astrology to do. There's always a little something in there that can make you feel good. And I like that. There ain't nothing wrong with that. And so all week long astrology Instagram, I've got in the Morning Mantra Pod, as you've probably seen, the Morning Mantra Pod, everything that I follow is basically like astrology Instagram. And they've been talking this week about the Day of Miracles. It's coming, 12, 12, 12. And what that is.
So actually, I just have to say something really cool. We had a full moon last night, as in this morning, 12:12 at 12:12, Boston had a full moon. And it was like the pinnacle of the full moon right at that moment. Pretty freaking cool. Anyway.
And it was pretty.
Yeah, it was.
And there's something to it. They say the gates of the divine are supposed to open up because it's happening in the last full moon of the decade during the solstice. And I forget what the window is, but this doesn't happen that often, but it's supposed to be like a really powerful thing. And the examples they give, like World War I started like 6 of these ago. World War II ended 5 of these ago. All of them are like big milestone, like game changing moments in recent human history. So it's like, ooh, what could happen today? I had a sitter. I don't usually have morning help anymore. We have a nanny that helps us in the afternoon so that I can be sure that my run gets done, even if the morning is a disaster, because it was hard to find morning help after all these years of having it. So I'm running in the middle of the day or the afternoon, which I don't love. I was really excited to have a sitter this morning so I could go on a run. And when I walked out the door, the sky was magenta. And I just posted a photo to the Fitness Protection Instagram and pushed it to the Facebook page. It was absolutely gorgeous. And so it kind of felt like a miraculous day where I get to do this thing I love but don't normally get to do and see the natural beauty of like this incredible sky. And I never carry my camera, but the person I was with did. She never carries her camera either, but she happened to have it on her and was like, well, I have, pictures of this. Everything about it just kind of felt like, oh, okay. Maybe it's not like the sort of miracle that would make me a saint, where I have Saint MK candles to light and stink up your room next to you. This smells so good, by the way. But maybe it's the type of miracle that in a time when we can get really overwhelmed with all the problems around us, I will take a really pretty morning and the reminder of hope and lean into a system that points to things like this, tells me when they're coming and says, hey, there's more hope too.
I love that. I'm so glad you got to have that because I know you haven't gotten it a lot recently. And that's such a good way to introduce this idea that we want to talk about today. And there are really 2 things that we have to do. We have to get into the issues that exist with New Year's resolutions. And then that, I think, brings us to your invention or, reclamation of Romjul, the word, the idea, and the way we started talking about it last year and the way we're going to start even earlier next year. Romjul's going to start in August in 2020, everybody. So just get ready for that.
I mean, if they can have Christmas in July, we can have Romjul in August. We can do whatever we want. We made it up. Yay!
Yeah, that's right. So where do you want to start? Should we start with New Year's resolutions or should we start with Romjul?
Let's start with the understanding of where Romjul kind of came from. And then, because I don't want to lead off with a whole lot of negativity. We're going to somewhere positive with this. So last year, it was 2018 and the end of the year was really rough. I was leaving my job. I was staring into the void, not knowing what the year ahead was going to bring because we were bracing ourselves for the worst in a prolonged IEP battle with Denver Public Schools, who had determined that they were not going to allocate any resources towards my special needs child, and which was not okay with me. And having seen this coming and having watched the battles the people around us were fighting, I was fully prepared for a scenario where my full-time job now would be advocating for my kid. I will do it because I love my children, but it's not what I wanted my life's work to be. As much as I would do anything for my children, I felt like there was something else that I needed to accomplish, and running is my tool to get there, to have that conversation. And so not being able to have a platform for that conversation anymore, my head was not in a great place. And, I was sad. Obviously, there was a lot of sadness there. And the thought of the new year wasn't even providing relief. It was not even out with the old, in with the, there's a big old question mark for us. So I remember going on astrology Instagram, looking for just anything that would give me hope. And that was the period when I got into it. It's what else are you going to do? No one can predict the future, but I need something that can at least point to the stars because they are definitely there, and talk about patterns in the past and give me hope of a repeated pattern of positivity in the future. Just something, anything to cling to. And one of the things that I came across was Nadia Bolz-Weber. I'm a big fan of hers. Even if you're not a Christian, her work could resonate. And I know a lot of people say this and then point to Catholic priest or whatever, but Nadia Bolz-Weber is a little different. She's a recovering alcoholic and a former stand-up comedian from Colorado Springs who became a Lutheran minister, and her work is just mind-blowing. She created the House for Sinners and Saints here in Denver, which is a very unconventional church to still have received Lutheran money and backing. Kind of incredible, but she's they cared about the liturgy. And I'm a very by the book sort of person. My look and presentation is a little bit different, but as long as what I'm presenting is in line, I was always going to have the backing I've never had the backing of anything, even when I had the look, the feel, and the beliefs. So I just love seeing her exist in this world. That gives me hope. On her Instagram, she was talking about the miracle of Christmas and how it's a day that what's so important about it. It's the day when the soul felt its worth and understood what it was all about, the birth of Christ. It was a very beautifully written post. I was seeing this on the 26th of December, by the way. So I'm seeing this on Boxing Day. Christmas is behind. And then underneath that, I'm seeing advertisements as I scroll through Instagram for 30-day challenges and cleanses and New Year's kits. And I was just sort of like, how do we go from and the soul felt its worth to this? Like in one day, like gone now, on to the next, get ready for the new year. And I'm like, there's got to be a different way to do this. And I'm not there to lead this conversation with my clients anymore. And I don't really know what I would want that conversation to be. So when I started thinking about it, everybody likes Scandinavian shit, hygge, and I can't even remember the name of that, the Icelandic tradition, the Christmas book exchange. It's a very Icelandic looking word with several like apostrophes going in different directions and multiple F's. I can't remember, but there are lots of little Scandinavian traditions that happen this time of year when it's really dark, the sun doesn't rise. It could get really depressing in your soul as well. So you need a tradition where you sort of embrace the darkness. So you got excited.
Oh, that's because I'm Googling it and I have the word, but I want to pronounce it correctly. So I'm going to Google the pronunciation.
Yeah, it doesn't do you good to Google the word in Icelandic.
Jólabókaflót.
Jólabókaflót.
Yeah, that's what it gave me the word with, like you said, all the accents and then the phonetic pronunciations. That's what it's called. Jólabókaflót.
Well, I was like, well, since people are already open to this idea of Scandinavian something, there has to be a word for this period between Christmas and New Year. And I looked it up and of course, Scandinavia, the language. Just kidding. No, I think this is a Norwegian word, but Romjul. Romjul is the period between Christmas and New Year. And it is traditionally, according to the Wikipedia and the articles that I read about it, and this is not like a thing. This is not like a known thing. It's just a period of reflection and quiet because the thick of winter and the thick of darkness. And it's right for MK to pluck it out of obscurity and turn it into a thing. Yay. So with no real meaning to it that I could possibly be hijacking that I'm aware of. Because, the last thing I want to do is take like this sacred word and turn it into, my understanding, it's just like a name for that week. To my knowledge, again, there's no meaning to it. I'm like, how about instead of being a period that marketers are hijacking with, paleo and 30-day and keto and, kickstart your new year with, a running streak or a gym streak or whatever. How about if instead of looking ahead and swearing we're going to make all kinds of changes that we probably don't need to make, how about if instead we looked back over the year and truly reflected and said, hey, you know what? More of that. When my husband and I got engaged, one of his friends from Johns Hopkins sent the most annoying card I have ever received. I mean, it had those little characters from the Hallmark shoebox cards. More good stuff, more good stuff, more good stuff, more good stuff, over and over and over. And once you turn it on, it was just like, it went on absurdly long. You would just wait for it to end. Like, it's got to end at some point. You would shut the card and it would keep going. The card was like broken. More good stuff. I was like, how about if we had that more good stuff, like identified the good stuff in 2018 and then identified so much of it, there's no wagon to fall off of it, that we can look back, do a check-in midway through 2019 and say, hey, yeah, I haven't done that yet. Let's do that now. So it's instead of feeling bad, we get excited. Oh, I forgot to do that. Yeah, let's do that. There's got to be a different way to frame this year with a little bit of excitement that doesn't involve getting rid of all expectations and setting us up for Loserville, because that's what I get from people when they would hand me a New Year's resolution to work towards a goal or achieve something. And I would look at it and be like, how about instead, you just don't want me to have goals. I want to have goals. I'm like, I have goals too, y'all. But the reason I'm still here chasing them is the fact that I'm not running full speed behind them every single day and worrying about the distance between me and the goal. I'm looking backwards. I'm giving myself credit for the work that I've done. And we need a framework to do that as well, year by year. So that's where Romjul came from and why I made it up.
And you talked about the ways that people really wanted to embrace it, myself included. So it's one thing to hear this idea coming out of you and being like, oh my God, she's right. This has been my whole life. I mean, I know that I did not really know what to then do with that, And like you said, when we were planning this podcast, years and years to a lifetime of thinking this way every single year is not going to just come apart after hearing one epically long Twitch broadcast, as amazing as that was. So what do we do? How do we take this idea, which I think is really amazing and really, really resonant with what we talk about in the fitness protection program in general, and go forward with it and like actually start to change and interrupt these patterns?
So I think most of the people who I encounter in my current role are overachievers, whether or not they consider themselves to be, whether or not they identify as type A, and a lot don't. They are overachievers in the sense that, look at this hobby that we have. I don't just run for fitness. I run for fitness, and YOLO, I join races every once in a while. That's kind of badass. Like, there's absolutely nothing like this hobby. And I feel like people, whether or not they acknowledge their badassery as they walk through the door, we all tend to gravitate towards the same very limited set of goals. And not to knock on the New York Times running blog. I love it. I love the work that Lindsay Krause and her name just flew out my brain.
Jen Miller.
Thank you. Yes. I have not had all of my coffees, plural, yet. And I got up early, so it's been one of those mornings. But yeah, I love the work that they're doing. But even they, in their most recent one, they had all just run the New York City Marathon. Lindsay just ran Sim and set a new personal best of 2:53, which she was super excited about. Both of them, when they're writing and on their Twitter, they're looking to 2020. What now? Same thing, just faster. Find a race to be excited about. And I'm like, is that really all there is? There's got to be more. There's got to be more. Like, I run, I race, repeat. And run, race, repeat, there's going to be a point when you just can't get excited about repeating either of the two. And I don't want that to happen for anyone. And how do people keep going without the low-level trauma that I had in my life that got me started running in the first place? Remember, I don't run because I'm a winner. I run because I lost the genetic lottery, helping my dad recover from his quintuple bypass. So the way I choose to look at it is when everyone has resolutions, right? There's that thing that you want, or you want that outcome that you want, and you feel bad because you haven't pursued it yet. If you go back to that meme that Sarah was talking about, the goals from 2012, I say there's a reason you didn't pursue that thing back in 2012. I think there's a reason you fell off the wagon, and that reason is not that you suck. This goes back into the long-winded thing I told you yesterday on the phone. When I was an investment banker, when I worked on Wall Street, when I was
MK
at
Business
Wharton,
School, MK Business School is in session, everybody. Listen up.
I could talk about like how terrible and toxic a lot of these environments were, but I can also talk about how firmly grounded in logic a lot of the processes tend to be. And my favorite is the first thing, and you are trained at Wharton to do this. What is the first thing you do when someone hands you a spreadsheet? Check the assumptions. Check the assumptions. You don't do any work. You don't look at the final outputs. You do nothing until you have checked the assumptions. If someone hands you a sheet and does not have an assumption tab in the front, you need to think twice about going further into that negotiation. There's a reason, because this is such a common standard practice that anyone who doesn't do it and didn't catch their analyst to say like, hey, where's your assumptions tab before handing it to you? That was intentional. And if that was intentional, that's not a good way to start off. Like, it's that simple, that basic, that common, and that egregious a mistake. It's not actually a mistake at all, you know?
Yeah.
So to that end, the assumptions tab is very, very simple. And it's easy to overlook, because what you're doing in finance is that you're modeling out the present and predicting what the future could bring, kind of like astrology. Even though finance would probably not appreciate the similarity between finance and between their financial models and astrology. I like it. There might be 5 output boxes on that page, and the numbers in them you can change. And if you change that assumption, the entire 2630 tab 5,000 column model changes too, and as do the outputs at the bottom. So those assumptions matter. The assumptions are what the entire model rests on. Are you assuming a 10% growth rate year over year? Now that is huge and egregious and frankly really stupid. Like a 10% in most year over year into perpetuity is just way too high. That's never going to happen. Even if that's a number that you've smoothed out over time, that's still too high. It's a long way of saying if an assumption is off, you'll know it on sight. You'll adjust it before you go any further. And I kind of wish we had that framework anywhere else in our conversations when we're not talking about a financial model. to check our assumptions before we go further about the outcomes, the outputs, and the work that our consideration, our analysis has predicted or predicated. So what I always want to do with folks is check their assumptions. And I was hoping that Romjul would give us a way to do that. And since I know that it wasn't intuitive last year, I wanted to start introducing this period where people could start thinking about their resolutions, write them down, send them to us. And then, you know what? I will turn it into a roar because I want to think of each one as a Romjul roar. I will do that for you. So we'll go roaring into the new year, celebrating what you did this year and what you want more of next year, rather than looking at the parts of you that need to be fixed, the parts of you that are broken, because that is the faulty assumption. That is the thing I can't abide. That is the 10% that I would erase, change, and throw back at you and say, that's inaccurate. You are not broken. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not losing. You never have been. There is nothing you need to do differently. Let's think about what you want to do, what you have enjoyed doing, and let's make the work for you. Don't come to me with a list of resolutions that are the right answer, that what everybody else wants, because you think it's what you should be doing, because it's where you think your energy should be going, because it's the right answer. The right answer and the true answer, the further apart they are, the less happy you're going to be, and the more likely you are to fall off the wagon, not keep those resolutions, and already feel like shit 2 weeks into the new year.
And if you're listening to this and realizing like, oh man, yeah, that is an assumption that I have carried around with me for my whole adult life, that's understandable because the marketing this time of year is ridiculous. All anyone does right now is tell us how we need to change. And this I do remember about last January. I remember having just come home from a trip to Paris with my family for 2 weeks, which was amazing, having eaten all the things really happily and excitedly and felt really good, and then come home to all this like, Weight Watchers is on sale right now, and look at all this fat blasting, whatever, all these
new year, new you. I don't need a new Sarah. Does Sarah really need a new Sarah? I don't need a new Sarah. Sarah's amazing.
I think I remember saying this to you, like, I am getting the strong sense that I should want to lose weight right now. And I don't think I do, but man, I am struggling to sit with this and know what to do with it, because I am so used to assuming that of course I should want to lose weight because it has always been there, you know?
You should want to lose weight. Everyone should want to lose weight, whatever. It's shaming to live in the should. I don't care about anyone's weight. Losing weight is, again, to bring it all back to finance and bring it back to numbers, systems are easily gamed. Meaning, if you're trying to game an outcome with numbers, it's easy to do that. That's why those assumptions matter. The second thing I look for after the assumptions tabs, I want to see the R squared of the most important heavily weighted variable, because that changes everything as well. If you've assigned it an absurdly high weight, like anything over 1.2, then I have to be like, really? Let's set this back to a normal R squared, assign this to R squared, a normal value, and then work forward from there. And that's when the conversation's usually over. They're like, oh yeah, well, everything's going to look nice and normal now. I'm like, well, why that variable? So again, that's the variable you have to look at when someone's promising you portfolio returns year on year. Then they've assigned the R square of whatever variable they're trying to sell you. And you're just, anyway, not to go off on a tangent, but this is why, like, when I sit down with somebody who claims to be a numbers person, I'm like, they better be ready to tear that model apart or give me that free weekend in Vegas or whatever it is. I hate Vegas. I would never take a free weekend in Vegas. No offense to people who live in Vegas. I'm trying, but you know, like the timeshares and whatnot, like if you sit through the sales pitch, whatever. So past performance is no guarantee of future returns, but it's also no guarantee that what was happening in the past was broken either. When I think about all the promises that you're being made, all the encouragement you're receiving that's being reinforced all the way around you in society, it's easy to come back to this notion of moving a number around artificially. So losing weight, if you want to lose weight, I'm not going to tell you it's the wrong thing, but I will tell you that pursuit of a lower number anywhere, whether you're in finance or playing in a model of that forecasts, or if you are at home trying to think about which race is going to be the best and most likely to get you into Boston if you have a good day. When you're trying to game that outcome rather than focus on the process, you are already a little bit skewed in the decisions you are going to make going forward. And you need to be very, 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 very careful. So when someone says, I want to lose weight, I have no doubt whatsoever you would do whatever it takes to lose the weight, even if the things that you're doing aren't the best things or the smartest things or the healthiest things. If someone says that I want returns at all costs, well, I mean, we've been seeing all over the place in the news this year. I don't even need to talk about the scandals of things that people have done to deliver returns to investors, to hide losses, to game an outcome. Instead of saying, hey, things are down, well, let's write it out. It's just a quarter. It'll be fine. We'll move on. To hide at all costs, to game to a certain number so investors don't sell your stock. That's the pattern that I see over and over. It's trying to game the system to get the result. And I really am like, then how is running working for you if it's the tool that you game to get the result that you want? Like, if we have to do that in some part of your life, cool, I get it. But we don't have to. We don't have to in our personal life. This thing that we do really should work for us. The work we do should work for us. We should feel good. We should feel empowered. And I've yet to see a list of New Year's resolutions that do any of that. And if you accomplish them 2 weeks in, what do you do the rest of the year? Maintain? No one talks about that. What does that look like? So, okay, you want to lose 10 pounds? Great. You lose 10 pounds in January. You gain it back in March. Did you just nullify your excellence? Did you just break your New Year's resolution? That's why I get so nervous about numerical goals and targets. I mean, not just because somewhere inside me is the inner child who called out Enron's fuckery and got docked real hard in my accounting class about it back at Georgetown undergrad. Funny enough, we've got a listener in this podcast who heard me mention this in the past, and she was like, oh yeah, my husband worked on that.
Wow.
Not for Enron, but like trying to call it out. Like she was working for the government to bring them down. And we had a really interesting conversation about that. What they were doing, it was legal until it was definitely fraud. It wasn't directly illegal, but they were absolutely hiding losses, trying to game the system. Anyway, everything's good till it isn't anymore. But remembering back then in the paper that I wrote and the arguments that I had, well, like, gosh, this is what they promised to deliver to investors. You really don't think it's possible that they're gaming this number? That was around the time I started thinking about maybe I don't need to do that to myself. Maybe I don't need to have straight A's. Maybe I actually need to learn the content. Maybe there's another way to objectively evaluate myself, my progress, my work, and the world around me that isn't tied to numbers. Maybe numbers are fallible. They have value. Boom, boom. I still love that joke. Numbers have value, but at the same time, they're meaningless. And they're only as good as the story that exists in between the data points that exist in between each data collecting session. And the story should jump out at you. You shouldn't have to look for it. So if the story that you're getting is a negative one about you, then I would question the numbers that you're using as benchmarks or as data points.
So what do we do with that? How do we flip the story and like really start to change our thinking? When we were talking about this, you mentioned CBT and certain things that you have. It should be clear to everyone, but just in case it isn't, you've been practicing this for years and you have a lot to say about it. And for the rest of us, we have a lot of practice ahead. How do we start? Where do we start?
Well, cognitive behavior therapy, if you can afford it, if it's covered in your insurance, like go for it. You've got to be ready. It was a while before I was ready because it is a very frustrating process. And that process involves the way it was when I went through it. And there are lots of different ways that it can present. But the way that it existed in my world was rewriting the narrative about myself. So something as simple as tell me about your day would involve interruptions. In an hour session, I might not even get halfway through a story. It's why like now I get so like, when I get interrupted, because I'm like, let me just sometimes I'm still responding to my very first CBT therapist. But there's an importance there, and it's why I talk about narrative so much. The way we talk about ourselves and other people reveals the way that we actually feel about ourselves. And that is super important. Once you see that, it's hard to unsee it. So when a person comes to me and says, I really want to get better this year and I really want to qualify for Boston and I'll do absolutely whatever it takes to get there, that's when I start to have some questions like, let's break this down. Why this? Why do you need this? And then once we get into like the importance of Boston, that's when things really start to fall apart because people usually don't have a very good reason. Why Boston? There are lots of races you could qualify for. Why this one? And not to say like it's the wrong thing to want, but if your easy effort pace right now is like 14-minute mile and you want to qualify for Boston this year, one, again, not to say it can't happen, but what if it doesn't happen? And I would say that to anybody, even if like your easy effort pace was an 8-minute mile. I'd be like, well, what if it doesn't happen? Then how are we still going to feel about this year? Instead of focusing on the outcome, which is a qualification for Boston, then we need to focus on the process. What is standing between you and showing up, having a bad day and still qualifying for Boston? Is it strength? Is it endurance? Is it you're not getting any sleep because you have a 6-month-old baby? Is it the fact that you feel like some things in your life are falling apart and you need something to feel like a winner? And this is the first thing that you latched onto and said, that would make me feel good, so I'm going to go for that. Again, there are no wrong answers as much as it is self-aware of why we chose that. And in cognitive behavior therapy, it was a process of pulling apart the narrative that I had about myself in my brain and who I thought I was and my perception of the world around me as reflected by that narrative in my brain and changing it. So instead of I'm really fat and people are terrible to me because I'm fat and I'm not going to get the things that I want in my life because I'm fat, therefore I need to lose weight. Cognitive behavior therapy. And again, not a guarantee. So if you're a practicing therapist listening to this and you're like, that's not what I would do. I'm just saying this is an example of how the conversation could go is, what would be different if you lost weight? Is that really what we need to do? Maybe we need new people. This entire conversation is predicated upon the assumption that you are lesser because you're fat and people look at you and think that you're lesser because you're fat. Maybe that's true and there's nothing you can do about that, but maybe we could change our environment before we start taking drastic steps to change ourselves. Maybe what's broken isn't you. Maybe what's broken is their attitude. Maybe what's broken is a society that is tied, greed and sloth, which aren't even in the Bible, to a moral code that we all implicitly buy into and say, well, if you just did a little bit more work, you would be the way you want to be. As though it's snap your fingers, it's that easy. As though you just haven't wanted to do the work. And why is that always our default assumption? That you just don't want to, that there's something wrong with the person who doesn't want to work hard and that's presented in their body. Start there. I disagree with your assumptions, which means I disagree with the story and the way you're telling it. So let's change that assumption. You are absolutely effing fantastic. You have everything you've ever needed in order to succeed. There are some blockages, possibly, between where you are and where you want to go. But let's start by thinking on that narrative about yourself before we even get to how others perceive you, which is not to say that fat phobia isn't real. It is, which is not to say that those forces aren't true. They are. But the problem isn't you. It's everyone else. But we still got to navigate this world with everyone else in it and preserve your sanity. So how do we do that? By changing the way that we view ourselves and the way that we evaluate ourselves. So that's where cognitive behavior therapy came into play for me. And this is not therapy. Running is not therapy. And we really need to stop saying that. Like, you will never hear me say that. Therapy is my therapy. Running has therapeutic value. So does riding horses. So does lighting a candle. So does searching astrology Instagram, looking for a modicum of hope on an otherwise terrible day. Anything can have therapeutic value, but nothing is therapy except therapy.
Yes. And I have been really gratified to see people saying that more often on social media and in other places. I think it cannot possibly be said enough. And so we get here to this place where maybe we're starting to think about, all right, well, so what are my roars? How do I take my resolutions and turn them into a roar? So I'm going to give you an example of one that I asked a few people about their past experiences with New Year's resolutions. And someone wrote back and said, in recent years, I've tried really hard to just set goals for the coming year, but even those still have the pressure of resolutions. My husband and I, would tackle them like job goals. They had to be smart. There were goals for each aspect of life: health and fitness, spirituality and church, professional and career, family life, etc. It got stressful.
I want to pause there for a second. When she says SMART, that's an acronym, SMART. I don't remember. Simple, measurable, accurate, reachable, and thorough. I forget what it stands for. Something like that. SMART.
That didn't even occur to me that it was an acronym. It is in all caps, but I didn't know that she meant it that way. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming that's what she meant. And I hate the idea of SMART goals. I fundamentally reject it, mainly because it says measurable. So if you can't measure it, it's bullshit. That's already a flawed framework that you're working with. When we're talking about feelings, when we're talking about progress, when we're talking about life on a day-to-day, that's where the measurement doesn't need to come into play. For example, if you're trying to lose weight, you have the goal of losing weight and pulling things, quote unquote, together, whatever coded language you want to use, and you're weighing yourself on a day-to-day basis. That's a bad incentive to keep doing what you've been doing, because that's not how it works. If you're putting something in the market, you can't be watching that stock and your portfolio on a day-to-day basis, because it's not going to lead anywhere good, even if you work in the financial markets. So I tell you that to tell you this. I prefer the THINK framework.
I've got both acronyms. Okay. So the SMART acronym is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. I did not know that was a thing. Thank you for that.
Fuck time bound. Sorry. Fuck time bound.
Yeah. And I've seen that
measurable.
in a lot of different places too. And so then the THINK acronym is
for bullying. And it's supposed to be thinking about the words that come out of your mouth. With what we're supposed to teach our kids. This thing you're about to say, is it thoughtful, heartfelt, intelligent, necessary, and kind? It must be all 5 or it doesn't need to be said. And I think this is how we need to think about goals. Are they thoughtful, heartfelt, intelligent, necessary, and kind? Then you don't need it. It's why I get so angry. Like, are you going to feel better if you lose weight? No, some people might be nicer, but that's going to mess with you. Why didn't you treat me like a person at 400 pounds, but you would at 350? You would at 250. That ain't you. Like trying to perform to a standard so that other people will acknowledge your humanity. That ain't you. It never was. We're trying to fit a mold so people will stop abusing you. I say F that. People need to stop abusing. The goal should be finding a way to survive and be happy with yourself on a day-to-day basis, despite what's going on around you, because there's so much you won't be able to end. And that does not minimize the experience a lot of people have in this world that will be very different to mine as a privileged, white, cisgendered, heterosexual woman of means. Like, there are things that are definitely easier for me, but there still is a way to sort of navigate forward and keep your head above water without taking on this framework of abuse and putting it on yourself that makes you complicit in a system that says, well, if you just lose some weight, we'd be nicer. Because when you lose the weight and they are nicer, you've just reinforced that notion.
Well, but I mean, in Brittany Runs a Marathon, she loses the weight and then, the train waits for her.
Yeah, I've ranted enough about that movie. My husband saw it over the weekend, by the way, and was like, by the way, you guys were right. That was terrible.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow.
My husband, he loves bad movies. Like A Christmas Prince, The Royal Baby was just released by Netflix. And he and my daughter are so excited. And Disney has a series called Noelle. And there's another one called, he just loves those Hallmark movies. He would watch Hallmark Christmas movies all year long. There's an article back in April about how Lifetime was preparing one to be released every single day for the month of December this year. More than 30 were in production. So he was just over the moon for that. There are going to be so many bad Christmas movies. I can't wait. I'm like, okay, honey.
I love that.
So for him to have watched this, and that was all he would say about it was, you were right, that was really terrible, and not make eye contact. That's serious. That's serious. Fuck you, Brittany Runs a Marathon.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, I've thought of that movie multiple times in this conversation because it wants to tell you that that's how this works. That if you would just, get it together, it's a total New Year's resolution movie, Yeah. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to run this marathon and my life will be turned around. And look.
For the record, if you're listening to this and you haven't met me and you haven't been to my Facebook page, my husband's fat. He's fat and I love him and he's perfect. And there's no part of him that needs to change, but this world needs to be nicer to him. I've gone off about that too, and the fat phobia that came through the rugby community and how quickly I jumped on top of that with the morning mantra and, Pinterest and pushing those memes absolutely everywhere I possibly could. That was when I was like, we need to get serious about marketing so I can take the world to task if somebody comes for my husband again. Fuck this. Clearly I'm still mad about it, but I feel just as protective over any one of my clients that are receiving this garbage messaging anywhere. Know that I see you. I feel you. And this is what I want to push back against. I'm not saying it isn't there. It absolutely is. But first, we're going to focus on you and finding a way for you to feel good. And I want you to hear my voice in your head saying, ain't a damn thing wrong with you. You do not need to lose weight. And if you want to lose weight, that's okay. But you don't need to do a damn thing other than whatever it is you want to do, as long as you're not hurting one in the process. Namely you. And this candle I lit over here before we started this whole podcast, the St. Anthony, I think what we've lost is the ability to love ourselves and the willingness to do so. And if we could bring one thing back during this podcast, I would love it to be that. The love we need to find is the one for ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think that the first step really is this kind of this awareness about how embedded all of this is. It is not the only thing, but it is a thing. And it is the beginning of changing the way we think, is recognizing that we make these yearly decisions according to a patriarchal framework. And it pisses me off, pisses you off. I think it should piss everybody off, honestly. Yeah. Shaming to live in the should, but
I'm going to be really pious this year. Okay. I'm going to lose weight and I'm going to start volunteering at a soup kitchen 2 nights a week because I can afford it. I'm going to start giving away more of my clothes. I'm going to start whatever the thing is, you're performing. Who are you performing for? Where are you wanting the praise and validation to come from? If no one saw that list, would you still want to do the things on it? Would you still care? After you made your list, who was the first person you wanted to show it to? Who is the person that you hoped would notice that you are working towards these things? So again, to keep going back to the weight one, you want to lose weight? Okay, cool. But if that's a goal and you're talking about it and it's out there, who are you hoping will notice that? And what are you hoping the result will be? That is the cause effect that really needs to be explored in therapy, because what you're responding to is it's definitely not me. And it might not even be you, but it's hope that if I do this thing right, then the abuse will stop. Then people will be nice to me. I'm like, well, maybe we need to get you some new people, because this shouldn't be happening at any size. 1. 2, I'm going to volunteer in a soup kitchen. Okay. For what? Why a soup kitchen? Who do you hope will notice? Again, if there was never a picture of it anywhere, you're not going to be posting this to Instagram. You're not allowed. Most of them have had to get really open about you're not allowed to, unless they're a celebrity that even like when Kim Kardashian, they do a lot of volunteer work, and they're not like, you wouldn't know about it because they don't bring the camera crews. They're not allowed to. It's like, you can support us, but not in this way, because we don't need tourists coming in. Poor people are not a tourist attraction, and they really don't need to be. So why would you show up and volunteer instead of just donate money so they have supplies or make it financially viable into the future? There are lots of ways to help. Why did you choose this? So recognizing the performative aspect to your resolutions is kind of step 1. And you're not ever going to completely get that on your own without being, frankly, in therapy, because it hurts. It hurts to say, you know what, because my parents actually think I'm a bad person, that I'm really greedy, and that every job I've ever had reinforces the fact that I'm greedy and narcissistic, and I just need the world to know that I'm not greedy or narcissistic. So I'm going to do this clearly not greedy, not narcissistic thing. And then your therapist might remind you that every single politician who's ever run anywhere shows up and volunteers at a soup kitchen, and most politicians are narcissists. Now what? Do you still want to go to a soup kitchen? So if what we're really trying to do is prove that you're a good person, then maybe what you're saying is you don't think you're a good person. Let's talk about that. Some people are never going to give that to you. The people that are telling you that you're a narcissist and the problem is you might never, no matter what you do, are ever going to agree that the problem is the way they treat you. Because if I can make you think the problem is you, go lose some weight, I'll be nice to you, then that puts it on you instead of on me, right? So how much are we absorbing and accepting from other people, thinking it's our fault? If I do the right thing, I'll fix that. So if your resolutions include any sort of even subliminal thinking, if I do X, then Y will stop, that's a problem. I want the world to be awesome to you, but I also would much rather be the force field and the shield that pushes the world away and gives you space to do whatever it is you need to do, however it is you need to do it. But I only want you doing in things here that you want to do. So again, that's a lot of words and it's very high level. But if you were to take something like, I want to lose weight, I would kind of break it apart into, okay, why? And then from there, look at like the thinking, like, who am I performing for? What am I hoping will actually be the end result of this? So-and-so will be nicer to me. Maybe what we need to do is work on our connection and get some bolt cutters. If you do nothing else from Nadia Bowles-Weber, Google her name and look for the Nadia Bowles-Weber bolt cutters. The link will be in the show notes. It is one of the most powerful things I've ever heard about forgiveness. That's why I started going to church again after I heard her say that. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe there is a message for me out there somewhere. And she talks about how grace and forgiveness, it's not about saying everything's okay and building bridges with that person in your life. It's about saying what you did was so terrible, I will not be connected to it or your mistreatment of me any longer. And like, she thinks of that pain and that mistreatment as a chain, and forgiveness is a set of bolt cutters that severs your bond with that person and their mistreatment of you permanently. And that, I love that visual. She describes it better than I ever could. So maybe instead of changes, the change we need to make is cutting those ties that bind us to our mistreatment. Let's start there. Now let's look back and one by one celebrate what we did in 2018 and do more of that in 2019 rather than think about what it is we need to stop and restrict and change. How about we just make it a nonstop celebration? So if you say to me, I want to lose weight, I would be like, it's hard to turn that directly into a roar because we could turn that, I would think, into like 5 or more different roars. So why do you need to lose weight? Well, because I gained about 25 pounds last year and I'd like to fit my wardrobe again. Okay. Well, let's talk about that. How did you gain 25 pounds last year? Well, I just had a baby and, I didn't have childcare. So I spent a lot more time at home and I wasn't as active as I would have wanted to be. Yada, yada. That's a very traditional narrative. I'm just making this up and is as inoffensively as humanly possible. I'd be like, well, okay, you know what? Let's look back on 2018. And instead of being mad at yourself, because when you're saying I'm going to start doing this, you're saying it's a problem that I was not. So instead of saying it's a problem that I was not, therefore I shall start, let's look back and say, hey, you know what? I wasn't running because I had a baby. And you know what? I spent a whole lot of time at home cuddling that baby and I had a really great time, but it's time to get out the door again. I would like to make some friends again. I'm going to join a run club. I'm going to find some people to go do this thing with so that there's a time and place. And I'm going to start creating space for me because I like running, because I like moving, because me wanting something for me is mutually exclusive of loving my children. Wanting something for me might be a zero-sum game when it comes to time, because either them or me, but that doesn't make it wrong to choose me 1 hour of the day, every day. And a run is a really great, low-hanging fruit that all of us can grab. Not everyone can afford a gym or even has access to one, but you can probably find some safe place to move. I grew up in the country, y'all. You know where we went in the winter? The skating rink. Yep. Back to 1970s, we had a skating rink a mile from our house, and my dad, he would rent it early in the morning, super early, before we could afford the exercise bike. We would go there and do our jogging at 5 a.m. because there was no safe place to really do it in the neighborhood. There are no shoulders on the roads where I'm from. So it's about troubleshooting and finding what it is you need to get. But there might be something you can do. If you've been like, well, there's no easy answer, therefore it's a no. Or, yeah, you know what? I have truly thought through every scenario and it's still definitely a no. That isn't lack of trying or thinking it out, but maybe thinking differently, which isn't something a lot of us taught how to do. Take the number off of it. Well, I gained 25 pounds and now I need to lose 25 pounds. I spent this year having a baby and focusing on it, and it was a really fantastic year. Next year, I'm going to do more of that. I'm going to keep loving that baby. I'm going to keep, cherishing this time with them while they're little and fat and have fat rolls on their wrists, because fat rolls on their wrists go away too soon. Fat rolls on their wrists are amazing, and the big chunky fingers that look like sausage that I just want to kiss them all morning long. Can you tell I've been doing this? I kissed like little chunky fingers all morning. It was fantastic. But, celebrating that while also making time for chunky finger kissing and time to run too. One does not necessarily negate the other, because as all parents know, it's not like we spend 9 hours a day kissing chunky fingers. There's a whole lot of other crap in between. And by having a run or starting your day off with something for you, it makes everything else a whole lot easier to bear. Because when you've gone day in, day out with nothing for yourself, that's where the depression starts to settle in. What's it all for? What's it all for? And you can't enjoy kissing chunky fingers anymore. So that's, again, probably more words than what we wanted. But on a very high level, that's how I would start to take apart something very base that isn't a good coaching cue. I want to lose weight does not ever lead anywhere good, because what you do to lose the weight matters. Or it might actually make you feel quite bad or develop bad habits. It makes you feel bad for where you are instead of celebrating where you are. Let's start there. You are an amazing person. You have made incredible decisions. You have not had as many options available to you as others, but you've maximized what you had. Now, going into next year, we're going to keep doing that thing that took up so much of your time, and we're going to make room for you, to do this other thing that feels really good. And you know what? It's measurable. F that. If you're finding space to do this brand new thing one day a month, that's more than what you were doing before. Celebrate what you have done, not what you haven't done yet.
I think that's perfect. I want everybody to think about this. Think about what New Year's resolutions I know are already swirling around in your brain. And if you feel so inclined, please send them to us. And if you feel so inclined and you want to try to turn them into a roar, send that to us too. And we are hopefully going to put a whole bunch of those together and celebrate the new year with a whole big collective roar, courtesy of you and courtesy of MK and her roaring machine. Because if you do not know where to start, I feel you, but guess who does?
Yay! Well, we're going to do a whole live stream with it, realizing that most New Year's resolutions have to do with relationships. I'm not going to let this person hurt me anymore, which is not the same as enforcing a boundary. I'm not going to let this get to me anymore. That's not a change. That's, again, assuming the problem is you. And I would never assume the problem is you. The problem is not you. The problem is real and it's external. Others involve losing weight or diet, because that's being marketed really hard to you right now. And a lot of us are eating all the Christmas sweets. I don't know if you've seen, but like Hershey's has these new s'more candies.
Ooh, no, I haven't.
With the marshmallow center.
Ooh.
The nanny got them as like treats or like bribes, basically for the kids, bribes for good behavior. Do you get your Hershey's Kisses with the marshmallows? It's binary rather than a sticker chart. We just got too many kids and they're too little. Like, F that. Sticker charts aren't happening. It's a binary. It's a toggle. It's like you get it, you don't. And yeah, they're amazing. So if you've been eating a whole bag of them, like I very nearly did last night while we were putting the Christmas tree on the wall. Yeah, I kind of get wanting to like start the new year off detoxing or cleaning. I get that. But again, how about we just celebrate what we just did rather than shame ourselves for what we just did? We shame ourselves for the fun we just had. That's not okay. So again, knowing that you're going to come down to relationships or to diet/food or to fitness, which is where I come in. Dahlia, Jumi, and I are going to be taking the very last Ask the Coach of the Year live stream. We're going to be all three co-streaming together. We're going to take everything in advance, and we'll obviously live comments as well, because we always need Sarah to produce and moderate. And we're just going to take them one by one. Send us your resolutions, and we will turn those resolutions into roars as much as we can. And obviously we'll not name names, and we'll try to keep things anonymous. We'll come up with a system to do that as much as possible. And I can be vague too when necessary. So don't worry about that. Do reach out and do ask us for help, because we want to really shepherd this process along to make sure that you are set up for maximum success throughout 2020, where we can look back and say, hey, what were your roars? Oh, that's something I haven't done yet. Yay, let's more of that. I had 7 roars last year that turned into, I called them my 3 commitments. And my 3 commitments was like, I'm going to dry my hair more. It's a very simple thing that makes me feel more pulled together than I actually am if I've taken the time to blow dry my hair. I said I was going to have more slumber parties, because when I look back at the garbage fire, that was my personal life in 2018. The one bright spot was the time, because I remember I needed around the clock care, and I couldn't hold my baby. And somebody else was looking after my kids, and I was in bed a lot, in a lot of pain. So we had sleepovers all the time. Different kid every night. Some nights, all 3 kids. We would watch movies and have sleepovers and cuddle, and they would sleep on top of me, and it was amazing. And I was like, that was one good thing. We're going to do more of that in 2019. And we have, and it's been great. I had slept with Shiloh last night, and it was wonderful. And the whole house slept. It was so good. And the third one, I was going to wear more bright colors, because I've been wearing black. I mean, most of my run clothes were either like neon, and then my non-run clothes were mostly black. And I was like, you know what? It's time for some colors. But that manifested differently. It came in the form of earrings instead of shirts.
It counts.
It counts. I'll take it. I got a bright red jacket at the Black Friday sale for Lululemon 2 weeks ago. Big, long, knee-length down puffer. It's fabulous. You will see me in the snow. It's great. Yeah, so those are my 3 commitments. And I don't think of them as resolutions, though it'd be tempting to go that way. My roars look very different. If you look at the hashtag Romjul ROAR, ROMJUL ROAR, one word, there aren't that many of them, because it was something I tried to push through the morning mantra pod. Granted, I didn't have a huge audience back then, didn't really know what I was doing, still trying to find my feet, trying to find a way to communicate light and hope to people during this period when we tend to beat ourselves up, go from our soul felt its worth to feeling really worthless. You'll see my roars are in there, and you might see the roars of a couple other people. You know, some really, really got it, and others, you know, it's hard to break the old patterns. And I didn't, reach out to be like, actually, that's wrong. More like, if that makes you feel good, we're going to go with it. But I get nervous about the wording. So one of mine was like, I found my voice, and I'm going to use it more. And I did. We now have 2 podcasts. I ended up having this whole platform. The stuff with my son, it was exactly as bad as we thought it was going to be. But his team said he wasn't going to need support. So if we didn't get any, it would be fine. And so far it has been. And all the worst case scenarios did not present. We're here. I don't have dry hair now, but I sleep over last night. And it's not about showing up every single day. That is a huge commitment. But the 3 things that I've done, I did a lot, and they made me feel good. And when I think about, do I want to do more of them? I'm like, shoot, yeah, I do. Shoot, yeah, I did. This is amazing.
And you didn't need to track them and count them. It's not about measurable. It's about looking back and being like, yeah, I did do those things, and they did make me feel good. And it doesn't really matter how much I did them and how much I didn't do them.
Yeah. How many times did you dry your hair versus shower and then not dry your hair? Like, a 10% growth rate on that year over year. Like, really, is that leading to better? I don't know. It's about setting up a framework where you don't feel bad. And instead of like, oh, I fell off the wagon. Well, what were you doing standing on top of a wagon? Like, that sounds really stupid to me, especially if that wagon's moving. Is it a wagon, or is it more like a tightrope? If you're walking on a tightrope, again, that sounds really scary and dangerous. And I have no desire to watch a movie of the guy who actually did that across New York City. Like, oh, Evel Knievel on the motorcycle. Forget that. F it. Nope. My balance is barely good enough to stand on one foot while I brush my teeth like Alex Lanton wants me to do. The rest of that, no. It feels like when we are conditioned to find the perfect thing, and if we latch on, and people pleasers do this, and, children You can discuss it with your therapist.
It's okay. You can just say, Coach Sarah, you do this. You can just say it. I did.
Coach Sarah, you do this. I used to do it. I used to do it a lot. And that's why I recognize it. Like I see like so much in you that is so amazing and so awesome. But I also see all the system that ground you to bits and told you that you were anything but. And the reason that they weren't going to give you what you wanted and what you had worked for was because your efforts weren't perfect and your strive for perfection didn't improve the product. It just kept you locked into a system where you were complicit in your own abuse. And I'm so proud of you for leaving that this year, even if we're not paying you anything yet, but we love you. And even if this all falls apart, and this is what I think of when I think about today being the day of miracles, a year from today, if we are making no money and you're like, MK, I can't do this anymore, I still know that everything we did this year had value because you would not be able to move on from this towards something else with the mindset that you had coming into it. You would not have been able to go through the transition that you went through this year to really, the past 3 weeks. You couldn't have done that in the corporate world. And you would still be grasping for perfection and locking into that same cycle, that replicating the cycle you had in academia, trying to please people who either couldn't be pleased or didn't have the power to give you what you wanted because that thing you wanted was really obsolete. And you see that all over the place. If nothing else, if we were to be like, this year is not successful if we're not all getting like big salaries, I'm like, then I feel like we're looking at this incorrectly. And granted, your time is value and we can't, not pay you into perpetuity. I mean, I would like to get paid too. Everybody here needs to get paid, but you're definitely going to get paid before I do. And God knows I want that. But my point is this, we could assign all kinds of numbers to it that would be bollocks and would fail to take into account what we've achieved and what you've done and the people that we're helping. We had a person unsubscribe from Maintain this morning who said, you've changed my life. She's like, you're still my coach. You will always be my coach. I'm going to keep listening to the podcast. I will probably be back, but I feel free to go roam, really figure out what it is that I want to do and then come back. And that's exactly what I designed. It's hard to hear what they're also saying is, and I'm not going to pay you while I do that. But that's why we priced it so low that we're not worried about every single client who leaves. We're leaving it as open as possible for anyone who sees it and wants to come back to be coached and loved again when they're ready. Because we're not selling training plans. We're selling a system of thought and a supportive community to execute this really wild vision of everything from the simple to the really, really not simple, trying to take a phrase like Romjul. It's taken was well over an hour to explain what we wanted to achieve and what we hope to achieve. But that's what is required when you're doing something new. So if you can get to this point, anyone can. Because if the person who had everything felt like nothing, there's no hope for the rest of us. So when I say like when I grabbed you, I was scratching at the bottom of the barrel. It's one thing when I'm looking at somebody whose life truly is hopeless, that is locked into systems that are so far beyond our control. I don't know if they could ever be unlocked. But for you, it was just like a very little shift. Then once that very little perspective shift happened, everything else has started falling into place. And hopefully it will for this company as well. Like I said, we're raising money right now. I really wanted to raise $16,000 to get a bust for Tiffany. And I'm frustrated that we're not there yet. And in those moments, I have to look back and say, we have raised $6,500, $6,500 right now with 124 donors that I'm aware of. There may be more. That's the receipts that I have, including one very generous corporate match for $300, 124 people. We have raised $6,500. $3,300 of that is for purposeful play. If I'm looking at the gap between 16,000 less 6,500, I would miss the fact that we raised $6,500 brand new, not even fully operational after 5 months, having just really launched this podcast. We've got a lot going for us. And if we focus on that gap, we're going to feel like crap. Let's look back at the 6,500 we've raised and really celebrate that. Let's think about how this has lit a fire at Purposeful Play. Let's think about how we are lighting fires in people's minds and hearts everywhere we go. We're creating the change that we want to see in this world. And that is something you can't necessarily quantify. Says the numbers person.
Well, the last thing I'll say is that when I look back on this year, there are a lot of things I'm going to remember about it. But first and foremost, this was the year that I decided to trust that this company wanted me for me and not the version of me that I was trying so hard to be for so many years that never felt like it came anything remotely close to easy. When you told me that you wanted me because of all the things about me that are in progress and other and other things, it took me a while, but I believe you. And taking that step is something that I'm really proud of, and making that shift in my mind. That's a really big deal. And I want more of that.
Trusting's hard.
Trusting's hard.
It's really hard. I get it. There were years where I would be in places that really were safe, where people were creating space for me. I didn't trust it. I didn't believe it. I didn't think it would last. And I was definitely had a hand in my own demise in a lot of different times. So I say that just to be like, if you find yourself looking for the answer that will end the thing is probably not the answer. It's that type of mindset that keeps us all kind of locked and trapped. If I do nothing else on this earth, if I can bust apart that paradigm for as many people as possible to find a modicum of the peace that I found in the past 10 years, gosh, I mean, I can't solve all problems and I can't make everyone better, but I can definitely call out some of the abusive nonsense and show you by making sure that anyone who's coached in love will know that they're winning at life and exactly why, and start calling out the fuckery as opposed to thinking about what parts of them needs to change, because there's no part of anyone here that needs to change at all. But I'm here to help you reach those goals. I will chart the course, but I ain't going to tell you what you need to do.
I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Do you have any last things you want to say to the folks?
So think about next year. What do you need to get? It's probably not going to come out of the resolutions that you're writing. Send us your resolutions. We will convert them into roars. I cannot wait to do that in the last live stream of the year. I was kind of disappointed we didn't have any this past weekend, but a lot of people might not even be there yet because it's only the 12th. May the day of miracles bring miracles your way. I can't wait to see what 2020 has in store.
Me neither.